I'm going to explain what equipment you need to get started and capture astrophotography images like this as quickly as possible. I'll cover different astrophotography types and outline your options for how to get going, including the most affordable and easy options. I've summarized all the content I'm going to cover today in a one-page cheat sheet which you can download using the link below, or else watch on and let's get into it. There are broadly three main types of astrophotography, so landscape astrophotography, deep sky astrophotography and planetary. Firstly, landscape astrophotography, also referred to as nightscape photography. This is the practice of capturing both an element of the Earth's landscape and the night sky. To do this, there are three essential things that you need: camera, lens, tripod. So the camera you need needs to be a DSLR or mirrorless with an interchangeable lens capacity. So it can't be a compact camera with a fixed lens. Whether it's DSLR or mirrorless is not a huge factor. There are some advantages to mirrorless models in terms of it being a lighter weight, in terms of ease of focusing, but it won't necessarily produce you better images, and a lot of great astrophotographers are using older DSLRs and having great success. So the one trait that you want to look for in your DSLR or mirrorless camera is to have a full frame sensor. A full frame sensor performs better in low light and enables you to capture a wider expanse of the night sky. I always recommend getting a used full frame over a new APS-C if that's what your budget level is at. Nearly all good landscape astrophotographers that are getting great results use Sony, Nikon, Canon cameras. There are a lot of good full frame DSLR or mirrorless models from these three manufacturers with a lot of good lens options. With regards to the resolution you want to aim for, it's not a case that high resolution is necessarily better. Aiming for 20 to 30 megapixels is actually kind of the sweet spot where you can get enough detail in your images. One model which a lot of great and successful nightscape photographers are using is the Sony A7 III. It hits all the sweet spots that we talked about in terms of traits, and it's not brand new on the market, so it's quite good value. So there are two things to look for in the lens that you use. One, a short focal length, that means a wide angle, so you can capture that wide expanse of the sky and the landscape. The second is a fast aperture, so indicated by a low f number. The faster this is, the better it'll perform at light gathering. With the camera that I mentioned, the Sony A7 III, it combines perfectly with a lens like the Sony 14mm f1.8. Now, a good tripod is often overlooked compared to the time and effort you'll put into picking a camera and a lens. A tripod that's going to work well for you is essential because you're going to be taking long exposures, so you need to stay perfectly still, minimal vibration. There is no one tripod that can be particularly recommended over the other, but pretty much the one trait you want to look for is carbon fiber over aluminium. It's more expensive, but carbon fiber is firstly lighter to carry, secondly better at absorbing any vibrations that could come through the ground. So those three things, camera, lens and tripod, are the essentials. You can do a lot of things, all those things we talked about, with just those three things. So star trails, Milky Way photography. One other thing you probably want to add is an intervalometer. This is a remote shutter device that enables you to have much more manual control over the settings on your camera, so you can then program it for the shots you want to take, and you can just stand back and let your camera work. Something you also might want to add for later, particularly for Milky Way photography, is a star tracker. These are devices that enable your camera and lens to counteract the rotation of the Earth, so you can take longer single exposures. Really, if you have any DSLR mirrorless camera, lens and a tripod, there's nothing to stop you going out and giving it a go. Full frame camera, better. Wide angle fast aperture lens, better, gonna improve your chances of getting a good shot. Carbon fiber tripod, again, but you don't have to have all these elements. You could gradually build them if you get into it, or you could just crack on with what you've got. Now on to deep sky astrophotography. So this is the capture of deep sky objects like galaxies, nebulae. This is an area where you can actually have wildly different setups, and there are different ways to go about. Option one is to have a deep sky rig with a telescope, a go-to mount and a dedicated astronomy camera. I've gone through nearly 1,000 images of photos that have been shortlisted for the Astronomy Photographer of the Year competition and seen what telescopes and mounts are working best and are favoured. So I won't get too deep on this, but the telescope should be tailored for imaging. So it might be something like an imaging refractor or an apochromatic refractor. This is fairly technical and advanced if you're not at that stage yet, so don't worry too much. But that will combine with a go-to mount, which is kind of like the star tracker I just described, but with a higher weight capacity to hold that telescope, and usually it'll have go-to capacity, so it'll find the object you want to photograph and it'll track it and stay on it while you're taking these images. And then a dedicated astronomy camera. These are small devices, not like DSLR mirrorlesses. You can't just use them yourself. They're designed specifically to use with telescopes, and they have certain traits that make them specifically good for, in this case, deep sky photography. So it'll have cooling, long exposures can generate heat which can degrade the images with noise, and they'll need high resolution. A company called ZWO dominates for dedicated astronomy cameras. Now the second way of going about deep sky astrophotography could do is to use the DSLR or mirrorless camera lens and tripod that you already have. You can have great success with that. You will need to add at minimum a star tracker. You can do this with a Move Shoot Move Nomad tracker, which is a few $100. So going about it this way is a great option if you already own these things for nightscape photography. If this sounds interesting to you, we have a course taught by a brilliant astrophotographer called Cayetana Sais. She teaches exactly this using your regular photography gear. If that sounds interesting to you, link below. But the third way of going about deep sky astrophotography is kind of a shortcut, and that's using a smart telescope. So this is the Dwarf. I've also had my hands on many other good models from Vaonis, from Unistellar, from ZWO. These are compact devices that contain everything in one. So you have your telescope, camera, mount, single point of control via an app on your phone, all in one. It's a great way of getting a first start in deep sky astro. You go outside, you plug it in, you set it up, and you can be taking photos in minutes. I link to a video where I go through all the best options that are available right now so you can help pick what's right for you. Smart telescopes are great. The ceiling and what you can achieve in terms of your imaging capacity is limited and lower than with the other two options of having a dedicated astronomy camera and telescope or using that DSLR setup that I just mentioned. There you have the potential of getting much better images. The smart telescopes are a great way to start if you want a first step. Now lastly, to photograph planets, you really do need an advanced setup that's a bit like the first deep sky setup I mentioned. The main difference is that you're going to need a long focal length telescope. This is because you're photographing something which is relatively much closer and brighter than deep sky object. You want to zoom in a more narrow way. You want to effectively get much closer to that object, and that combines with a dedicated astronomy camera that will have slightly different traits. So it'll be tailored to planetary imaging. This will mean actually a lower resolution. It won't need the cooling, but it'll need things like a fast frame rate capacity and a fast data transfer. This is because when you're planetary imaging, it's a different way of doing it. It's capturing lots and lots of short images, and then they get brought together to create the image that you want. So your telescope, your dedicated astronomy camera that's tailored for planetary, plus you're going to need again that go-to mount which you talked about in the deep sky rig. That's going to need to have the capacity, the payload capacity to hold that longer focal length telescope, which is going to have an additional weight. The best planetary astrophotographers are using usually Celestron SCT telescopes, so they're really the kind of the go-to for that long focal length. Smart telescopes don't really work for planetary very well because they don't have a long enough focal length, so they're really for deep sky. All of this is summarized in the one-page cheat sheet you can download below. So aside from the gear and the setups you need, there are some other pros and cons you might want to think about when you're considering diving into astrophotography and what type is best for you. The main one really is where you do it. Landscape astro requires you to search for locations, perhaps go out in the middle of the night, try and find dark skies, try and find the impressive landscapes that you want to capture in there. It tends to attract a kind of adventure photography demographic and audience who are willing to go and do those sort of things. If you don't have that capacity, jobs, kids, just don't really want to go out in the middle of the night, deep sky and planetary can be done from your backyard. So if you're looking to get into astrophotography, I hope you found this interesting and it was useful for you and a good explainer. You can get everything I've talked about in a quick one page and download download below using the links. If you want to get into landscape astro, then a great way to start is star trails photography. The reason why star trails are a great way to start is it's much less demanding in terms of the timing and locations you can shoot from. We have a great course taught by one of the best star trails photographers in the world. Link below if you're interested in that. If you think you're interested in deep sky photography using the photography gear perhaps you already own, then our Deep Sky Mastery course of K-Tiner size could be perfect for you. If you like the idea of a smart telescope, check out this video here. It runs through all the models available and the pros and cons of how to pick which one's right for you.